On that note, we move ahead to India's path to global leadership. Viksit Bharat 2047, India's roadmap to the global powerhouse status. On stage, we already have with us the moderator, Dr. Narendra, who's a strategic advisor, the industry professional, currently associated, of course, leading N-Cube collaboration, somebody who brings more than 40 plus years of expertise. We also have on screen Kanika Parishka, who is the Chief Economic Advisor of Union Bank of India. Dr. Narendra, Kanishka ji has limitations. And meanwhile, if I could have Deepthi Deshpande, Principal Economist, CRISIL, Rahul Agarwal, Senior Economist, ICRA, Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist, Bank of Baroda, and if we can also have Mr. Parwal. He's going to be joining in shortly. If you could have all our dignitaries with us on stage. Kanishka, of course, is already with us on screen, somebody who provides the strategic insights on macroeconomic trends, financial markets, and policy developments. Deepthi, thereby being the Director and Principal Economist at CRISIL. She is also recognized as a CEO Award winner for her impactful contributions to research excellence. We'd now like to humbly welcome all our dignitaries here with us on stage. And first, we'd request Dr. Narendra to bring our first panelists on the screen.
The first session itself, you had a blueprint, what could all be done to reach the Vikasit Bharat. And also, our Sandeep Parwal said that this, the developed nation cannot be merely a slogan, it has to have the various involvement. So the next subject what we have kept is, how are the India can become a global powerhouse and what is the roadmap to achieve that. So as an economist, they will be very frank, and at the same time, they will also give what could be done to make it happen. So now we are having here all the three economists from different organizations, and we have Kanakia Pasiricha in the Union Bank Chief Economist. Since we are slightly going beyond the schedule, I request Kanak Pasiricha, what are your views on the main theme of this discussion, madam? You are on the line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So first checking, am I audible?
Huh? Yes, yes.
Am I audible?
Yes. We are very much audible. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And really grateful to you for the opportunity and to be part of such an august panel. So I'll make few points. First, let me just repeat some of the points made by esteemed dignitaries before we started this panel discussion. First and foremost, for Viksit Bharat, the key point that was asserted is that India is touted globally, in fact by IMF, multilateral agencies, to become the world's third largest economy by 2030. In fact, we may actually move from a lower middle income country status, which we have gained since 2007, to an upper middle income country status by 2030. And this development is likely to be premised on the pillars of manufacturing, productivity. So a lot of positive pointers made. And of course, as India repositions itself on the global landscape, yes, there are some challenges that are being discussed, and the biggest challenge is that when our peers or the countries that have attained this, upper middle income country status, so to say, like China, Korea, even other Asian tigers, when they were growing, they were actually in a period of high manufacturing, high capital flows, high globalization, but we are in an environment where Indian economic growth comes on the back of decarbonization and deglobalization, and that is where the biggest challenge lies. Now, sir, just a few points. I'll just take one theme out of this and assert on the same. So first and foremost, with the trade deals being done, and as Dr. Dharmakirti Joshi also pointed out, that we will see manufacturing as the growth driver, and also join the AI bandwagon, that is, or key as a key growth driver, which is there globally. But just one theme which I want to pinpoint is, and it's both an opportunity and a challenge as well, which is where the policy proposals come from. The opportunity is for the banking sector to fund this threshold shift in growth. Yes, the economic survey is already talking about a threshold shift in our potential growth from 6.5 towards 7%. Banking sector, as per various estimates that are being discussed by DFS, various other forums by consultancies, will be able to fund a large part of this growth. But for that, the banking sector may have to maintain the credit growth in a range of 14 to 15%. These are very big numbers. So the underlying momentum for banking sector to fund the India growth story will have to come from nominal GDP growth to rise from the decadal average where it's stuck at around 10 to 10.5% to a threshold of maybe 11 to 12%. This is one metric that we need to watch out for because we as an economy are also looking for macro stability. The potential growth for real GDP is at 7% currently. 6.5 to 7 is a range I would want to talk about. Inflation is being contained at 4%, but a nominal GDP growth to see a threshold shift from 10 to 11 to 12% range is the biggest challenge that we are currently facing and needs to be adhered to. And now let me link the nominal GDP growth with other important metrics. One is of course earnings, which is key for FPI flows or other foreign flows to come to India. The other aspect is this nominal GDP growth linked to our deposit growth because the banking system needs to plug the funding gap where a persistent gap between credit and deposit growth needs to be plugged for the banking sector to move to 14 to 15% credit growth number, and that too without any funding gaps, with deposit being the primary funding driver. So the main bottom line conclusion I leave the audience and the August panel with is how to improve our nominal GDP growth, which will have its implications for earnings growth and also will have its implications for the funding gap for the banking system, and that is key for the banking sector to fund the India growth story. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kanake. I know that you have some other appointments. Thank you very much. Now I will ask Deepti Deshpande ji. See, India once almost thought that it will be double-digit growth. And of course, COVID, and later again recovered some 9.2. Then currently, we are all our making mind itself is maximum potential is 7%. So if we have to become a global leadership and also achieve the status of Vikasit Bharat, so where are all we missing the potential and why we are not able to, whatever type of calculation, why we are not able to take it to that level, and why we have to reconcile to 7%. Current situation I understand, but do you feel which are the potential areas we are not activized?
Sure. Thank you very much. Many thanks for inviting me, and I'm very glad to be a part of this panel once again. I understand your question, and I think that is probably the most key things in the minds of everyone. With so much happening around, with so many reforms, with so much potential that we've been speaking about for the last 20, 30 years, despite that, why is India not taking off? I think one of the key reasons is that we saw an extended period of time where reforms were missing or very patchy in nature or not very structured or planned. And typically what happens with reforms is, the way I call it, when reforms are going on in the economy, it's a period of correction because some difficult measures have to be undertaken. GST is good in hindsight, but it created some difficulty at that point in time. RERA is good in hindsight, but at that point it created some unpleasant situation. So what happens is, when reforms are being pushed into the economy, number one, in variety of sectors and after a long gap, it will take time to yield returns. Unfortunately for us, had COVID not been there, had the global environment been very supportive, or at least a little bit supportive more than what it is right now, probably those gains from reforms would have started showing currently. So what has happened for us is that D.K. Joshi in his earlier presentation spoke about marathon and sprint. I think we will have to sprint a little longer now. The marathon, the runway has gotten a little more extended, but I don't think that it is a reason for being discouraged or disheartened. I think it is a time where we need to ensure that some of the key things which would otherwise have been pushed, to the side are getting into the focus. Like I've been saying these days is, in some ways we should be thankful to Trump, because for long we've been talking about trade-related reforms, trade-related policies. India was one of the very few countries which wasn't engaging very actively with others on FTAs, etc. So those trade deals have been seeing light of the day now, are seeing a faster momentum. So I do believe that there are reasons why we will now be in a position to attain 7% growth over a medium term. But I think, I just want to highlight 3 or 4 strengths that we have which will help us do that. But and I'm glad that DK in his presentation spoke about the risks that we in CRISIL often highlight. So I will not talk about the risks, although they are and they need to be monitored, but the potential. I think number one, what is important is that at 7%, we are still one of the fastest growing large economy. It means that we are adding that much more demand into the world each year. Second is the fact that we have in the last 4 or 5 years, and we've done it by choice, we've brought our macro house in order. GDP growth, we've decided we do not want to, go to the 9 and 10% growth rates and fall back. We are choosing a more moderate, a more straightforward, stable path. Second is, India happens to be one of the only large economies where our fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP, our debt as a percentage of GDP, governments, has come down after the pandemic. Not only has it come not only has it come down, it's even below the pre-pandemic levels.
Correct.
What does that mean is that if this growth needs to be accelerated, we have the wherewithal to do so.
We have the leverage.
Yes, it is a choice that we are not doing it because we want to be prudent, because we don't want to put in unsustainabilities. The previous speakers also spoke about how the financial system today is at its healthiest in more than a decade, which basically means that the ability of the lender, NBFCs, be it banks, to lend is better compared to, you compare the situation
we are
with 7 years
banking.
back.
So
So I
now-
think all of these are really strengths
So
which
we'll,
help,
now-
in the short term.
Thank you, Deepti ji. So now, Madan ji, this budget which was placed, we were all thought and we are thinking also, it has put a strong foundation for the Vikasit Bharat. So did you find any significant such moves or enablers to reach or make a strong foundation or roadmap towards Vikasit Bharat?
Actually, the way I look at it is that we need to distinguish between policies
Yes.
and budgets.
Yes.
Okay, policies or reforms which we are talking of are something which are ongoing, and this is something which will go according to the time. When I say according to the time, when the government thought it was necessary, we were well prepared for GST2, we had GST2. Similarly, when we are talking in terms of labor reforms, as and when it was appropriate, we saw them being brought in.
Yes.
So therefore, policies and reforms are something which are ongoing. And I don't think reforms and policies can actually turn around the economy. If it was so easy to do it, I think there will be prosperity everywhere. All countries will be growing at 10, 20%. It doesn't work that way. Second, when you're looking at the budget, I think the budget is nothing else but an Excel sheet. It's the finances of the government.
Yes.
Just like you have a profit and loss account of a company, you have the profit and loss account of the government. And they try and make sure that the expenses or the expenditures work better through different programs. And I think that is something which has been done in a very pragmatic way. But to say that if I have an employment generation program, it's going to cure the unemployment problem in the economy, that is far-fetched. It'll never happen. The crux to our growth is actually internal. It's the private sector which creates jobs. And these are the jobs which actually lead to higher consumption. So today the problem which India has, the reason why we are not growing at 8 to 9% is that the two engines which need to fire are not firing the way they should, not because the government is not doing anything, but because the private sector is not doing. Now, let's look at the way in which the private sector works. Even today in the paper, we say that the private sector should start investing more. Now, when the government spends on capital expenditure, it does because it's supposed to do. Okay, I spend 11 lakh crores, 12 lakh crores, and nobody's going to question. But let's look at it, anybody in the audience, anybody in the private sector, you will invest only when you see demand. So we are not going to see engineering companies invest in capital unless they see there is enough demand. So part of the demand is being met through the budget when the government is spending, but on the consumption side, we don't see individual spending. Why is this? Because we're not creating meaningful jobs. So today when we say job creation has taken place, we have done so in construction, we have done it in logistics, but honestly tell me, can a Swiggy guy who's delivering food to you be in a position to actually add to the consumption which is required to create growth? So to my mind, it's a very slow process. Budget is one part. It will continue in the way in which it's doing. Reforms will continue the way which is appropriate. But growth will always be a slow process because we need meaningful jobs to be created, which increases consumption, which increases capacity utilization, which then leads to a fresh round of investment. So our investment rate today is stuck at around 30%. We had 34, 35% at the best of times. Now, the reason why it's not happening is because no private company is going to invest unless it sees demand. Because if I'm, as a company, I put 100 rupees as investment, every quarter I have to go back to the shareholder and say, look, I've earned a profit, I'm able to justify this expenditure. The government can spend 12 lakh crores even if there is no return on capital. We'll have a bridge which is under construction for 20 years. There is capital being provided, there is GDP being generated. We make complaints saying things are very sloppy, but you're not really answerable as far as the shareholder is concerned. So I think it's a slow process. So when we are talking of becoming a developed economy, we should also be focusing on the quality of growth rather than just a 7-8% number.
Say, Rahul ji, that we have recently entered into so many trade agreements. And, but just one I saw today that our exports grown by 6%, your imports have grown substantially, so resulting in higher trade deficit. But it is told that these agreements are all going to create a very game changer. So how do you see our export sector as a whole in the going forward?
So thank you, sir, for this opportunity once again. I think let me just link this question with the question that you put forth earlier to Deepti. The extra kicker in terms of growth that we need to move from maybe 6.5% to 7% to upwards to 7.5% to 8%. That missing link is probably exports and merchandise exports particularly. So I mean,
Manufactured exports.
Yes, sir. So look at some of the traditional sectors like garments, textiles, even food products.
Correct.
Exports have largely stagnated in these sectors. I mean, 10 years back, we were at, taking these sectors together, we were at around 80 billion and we are still stuck at about 85, 90 billion. So so now what these deals would do, especially the FTA with the EU, is improve price competitiveness,
right,
but it does not improve cost competitiveness. So these deals are good, but they are not enough. So what really we need to address is what ails the manufacturing sector. So what are the input constraints into the manufacturing sector? So that's policies around labor, land, electricity, and even infrastructure. Now, a lot of these issues need to be addressed by the state and the local governments. So that is probably where we need to see a lot of action on. And I mean, some of the previous speakers alluded to swimming against the tide in terms of exports. There are some countries that have actually done very well. So look at the example of Vietnam.
Yes.
In 2015, Vietnam's exports were about 160 billion. We were at about 320 billion. Now their exports are at 475 billion and we are still stuck at about 430 billion. So, some of these constraints, policy constraints, particularly at the local and the state levels, need to be taken care of to really benefit out of the trade deals. So as I said, I mean, there will be some kicker in terms of exports coming in from these deals, but to really leverage these deals, we need to continue with the reform process.
Diversification efforts have been done, but it has to yield and go to the market where you have a good margin and good demand. That is also, so all that is happening. Thank you. Sandeep ji, हमारे इकोनॉमिक सर्वे में लिखा था that Indian rupee is not reflecting its true potential. So what may be the reason Indian rupee is not, suddenly किधर आया हमने? So आपको you have so much interest in the global and domestic. तो अभी small limited में बताइए क्या reason है?
Sir, this is a very sort of a strange thing, and I'll say not apparently transparent kind of a structure, which is happening. The best part, and as you rightly highlighted, the dollar index has come down from 110 to 96.98.
Yes, suddenly.
And the rupee is also depreciating.
Correct.
And we talk India is growing. Now these can't be, these just don't justify mathematics.
Doesn't tally.
This doesn't tally. So what is being played and how it is being structured and what RBI is doing in terms of the pricing of the dollar or by their intervention in the markets is something which is different from what actually is happening at the ground. While Indian potential with the demographics, with all the other aspects, as I maintain, is very strong, which has a potential, but are the rules and the regulations and the policies structured in those lines? There are gaps. In fact, what is being done and what I understand is that policies are being created like a groundwork being done to make things where there will be a potential when the takeoff time happens. Rather than a takeoff, it could be a landing for somebody else also. And then there will be an opportunity emerging simply for the demographic reasons and with other capabilities being in place where that could really expedite the growth process. Because I was saying about
Yeah, please.
I was saying about the global concerns and the debt reasons and the other aspects. So on that, all I'll say is that with this, the diminution or the deterioration of the rupee simultaneously is concerning. The export participation is not what is being seen. While there are so many treaties being signed, as you just referred, this is something which will take time to really play out.
Really play.
And I'll just...
we'll hear from Madan ji.
Yes.
He has some views on that. Yes.
No, actually, when you're talking of the currency, I think we should remember it's the first time we have seen the rupee depreciate, even though our current account deficit is fairly good, less than 2%.
Yes.
Now, the thing is that the rupee was under pressure primarily on account of the capital account. We saw FPIs withdraw. They withdrew because of the uncertainty about the deal with US. The moment we had the deal with the US, we saw the rupee strengthening again. So I think that has been the odd piece which was there. And when we are talking of FTAs, see, my view is that signing FTAs is good, but let's not really jump the gun and think that exports are going to grow at 10-15%. That's not going to happen. Most of the FTAs will take us back to the disadvantageous position we were there in earlier. That is going to get normalized. Going ahead will require a lot more effort. And I remember, Narendra ji, we probably started our careers at the same time in 1980s. We have always been talking of export promotion, import substitution. Yes. I think export promotion is something which has been high on the agenda of every government. If it was so easy, I think we'd have been growing at 20%. But we still took pride when the tariff issue came up, that because we're a domestic-oriented economy, we have grown at 7%. So I think there's been a strength out there. Now, in terms of exports, yes, that could add an alpha to your overall growth process, but it takes long. There's too much of competition.
Yeah, in that particular respect, I wanted that only, that we are all our oil, metal, all that we are importing, whereas, as you said, very limited Atmanirbhar would have happened. So, whereas if we don't have the FDI as a support or portfolio investment as a support, because aapne gross FDI minus the outflow, net is very less now. तो हमने $80 billion हो गया, 80 billion बाद में इसका 4 billion आता है. तो ये सिचुएशन में हम, बिकॉज वी नो दैट वी आर शॉर्ट ऑफ रिसोर्सेज, एज यू राइटली सेड, प्राइवेट सेक्टर वेरी केयरफुल, उधर फॉरेन में पैसा रखेगा, इधर इन्वेस्ट नहीं करेगा, कैश बैलेंस अच्छा है, बट इफ दे डोंट इन्वेस्ट, हाउ डू वी एनहांस द ग्रोथ? सो ये मैडम को भी आई एम आस्किंग, यू हैव, सर, यू हैव एनीथिंग?
I just wanted to say that the current valuations and the way the import etc. is being done are completely skewed and they are not reflecting the real picture. Because the current approach in terms of how the markets are being impacted or how the FPI selling is there, they are just a exit route for the international investors, and the current transfer of capital from domestic retail to by way of follow-on offers or existing offer for sales etc. is just used as a transfer to either the promoters or the international or the institutional investors. This route is not in interest of building up the India story, while we are talking of a long-term growth, but we need to address this component part.
So, Madam Ko, one needs to add to that point. Second, we have a very much climate risk are visible. And, but sometimes I find even regulators are slow. In आपको मालूम है ना, Reserve Bank has also not responded. Or the government, state government, एक हिमाचल में हो गया, उत्तराखंड में हो गया, they don't have the money to make the loss, damages and recover. So how do you see this? We are, because next साहब बोलते हैं next हमारा climate 30 कितना सर 30? We are hosting here climate COP 2028. So we have to really take, there was one ranking of India also came down substantially saying, you don't have any policy net zero and all, simply बहुत सारा करने का है तो आपका वो भी because that is also relevant for our growth.
Yeah, sure. So I think two things. One point on the earlier one. I think if we want to enhance our growth, we want to make it lucrative for foreign investors to come and invest in India, not just portfolio but also long term. Number one requirement is policy stability, policy predictability. Now we have over the last couple of years managed to improve on that front. I think what is working against us at the moment is unfortunately a slightly short-term nuance, which is that India doesn't seem to have a very large AI story. Yeah. And I think that is the fashionable thing right now. So that's why a lot of money is going towards AI. Yeah. Secondly, I think if you look at the uncertainty quotient outside, there's an uncertainty index which basically tells us that the uncertainty level today is 3 times that of the pandemic peak, and it is 5 times of the global financial crisis peak. What it basically means is that if, similar to what also Mr. Sabnavis said, is that if the corporate is not assured of returns, he doesn't know when to invest, where to invest, how much to invest. Neither a domestic corporate nor a foreign corporate is going to come in with loads of bags of money. So they're going to wait and watch it for more clarity. And I think that's the story that India faces on the private investment front, on the foreign investment front as well. So I don't think that India is not lucrative for foreigners. The situation that we are in right now, which is not our doing but more a global doing, is what is pushing away a little bit of foreign investment at the moment. On the climate front, I think the clearer part I always convey is that for India, the climate goals are very different from some of the larger economies. While I agree with the physical hazards that are, out there and how states and center needs to support it, I also believe that, from an economy perspective, we are a lot more vulnerable in the immediate terms. Why so? Because we have a large dependence on agriculture. Every time there is a climate hit, huge amount of rural income loss takes place, for instance. That penetrates into our food prices and therefore food inflation. Interest rates go up, which is not good for the rest of the economy. So I think the short-term impact is much larger. One point I want to say is that some things also work out on their own, but if policy is supportive. The example that I want to list out is when we always talk about agriculture GDP, we all assume we are talking about farmers working on the fields and producing crops. But 50% of agriculture GDP today comes from livestock, fishing, farming. And why is that so? Because policies have been supportive. The growth rate in incomes there are higher than growth rate in cultivation, and the volatility of income there is also lower. So there are some offshoots there. It's not enough, but to me, to end it, I think the climate issue is a more immediate term problem than some of the 28-30 goals. Those are also issues to look at, but this is also.
I have I have to maintain the time, but Rahul ji, आपको एक है, that another area I am asking him, because poverty बहुत कम हो गए बोलते हैं, is it really correct of that or Madan? For you, the CPI inflation, some index change and all, what is that actually? People should understand. Is it really reflecting the changes, or base only change, or what are the changes? Ultimately, that our government target for RBI also due for, do you think that there may be any change in the target range? Yeah, please.
So really quickly on the CPI, there have been quite a few changes. So the base change has come after a very long time. So we had the 2012 base and now we've moved to the 24 base. Ideally, base changes should happen every 5 years. In terms of the changes, the weights have changed, which is the most important change. So the weight of food has come down. Within food, there have been many changes. So for example, pulses, vegetables, their weights have come off. Cereals weight has come down substantially. There are many inclusions of new items. So for example, OTT services, stuff like that. A lot of outdated stuff has been axed out of the basket. So we had stuff like typewriters still in the basket when no one was actually using those things. So compositional changes there, weight changes there. The number of services have increased. The coverage has increased. So the number of markets where data was being sourced from has gone up substantially. In fact, online markets are also now covered in the new CPI basket. So all in all, seems like a lot of robustness has been built into the new CPI.
Series.
Yes, sir. Now, in terms of what will happen to inflation, maybe, I mean, we are looking at a CPI inflation number of close to 4%. The weight of food has come down, so we were expecting this, the uptick in the old CPI series to happen because food was going from a deflation and to a high inflation, relatively higher inflation rate, and that sort of trajectory will get tempered down, feeding into the headline number.
And
now,
RBI may maintain the same rate, I think.
I think probably will continue with the 2
Yes.
to 6%.
Time. ये आपको, because it is a very favorite subject of you, how the real poverty has come down, or how are you finding?
See, if we look at government estimates, they say that poverty has come down, and I think that's something which is creditable. Just 2 points out here. One is we should remember that this is based actually on the consumption survey talking about household consumption. Now, what's really happened is that the government is giving 800 million people free food. So much of resources are being
Around the 2.5
released.
crore.
So therefore, you're able to spend on other items. So that is there. We have also created kind of jobs, which I said, but I think that's probably not adequate right now. We're out of poverty, but to get into the upperly mobile category, it would be taking some more time and effort. Wait for industry to provide.
So now, one word, India will achieve its true powerful position in global world? Yes or no?
Gradually, yes.
Yes. Up.
Yes.
Yes, no? Sir.
See, we will, but there are lots of qualitative changes which we should also be looking
Sure,
at.
correct. Mr. Sandeep had that there are challenges, but still, as a proud
it'll
Indian.
do after the global corrections or the crashes have happened, because we are then for the defining moment of centuries where there has to be a devastating scenario in the global finances. The global currency has to reset.
Give a big hand. I had loved to have another 1 hour discussion.
Actually, Narendra ji, while we are talking of Viksit Bharat and
Yeah.
becoming a developed country, that's just a number. Numerically, if I increase the GDP, per capita GDP by 10% for any country, they will become developed.
Correct.
In fact, the sad part is that even countries like Lanka actually have a higher per capita income than India today. So therefore, I think we should be a bit guarded. Let's not get over-enthusiastic about Viksit Bharat. That's why
correct.
I'm emphasizing on the qualitative.
That's why
aspect.
he is saying. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best, and we will go to the next. Please come, sir. We'll have a group photo. Quick. Sorry, we reduced slightly time. Yes. You are all.
And apologies in advance, all the panels are going to be 30 minutes, so I'm going to be apologizing because we cannot give them 30 minutes and rest 40. So we're going to be sticking to 30 minutes per panel. But can I please request all our audience members to continue with that applause for all of them. And of course, what are the panelists who shared their point of views, and what an efficient management of time. Right at the dot of 30 minutes they were able to conclude. We of course have our chief guest from yesterday who has taken out his valuable time in joining us on the same and gracing us and gracing our panelists with that opportunity to connect. And may I please request all our panelists to come together for a group photograph. We would just want all of you in one frame. Thank you so much to our key panelists for joining us for the first conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere as we are ready to deep dive into our next bit